Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the 2006 movie titled The Fall. Now, as a little disclaimer before we get into the review, there is a recurring theme in this film that could potentially be triggering to some listeners. So please know yourself, know your boundaries. If anything that I talk about is upsetting to you in any way, I have other episodes. It is definitely not necessary to listen to this one. So with that being said, let's jump into the review. So The Fall is probably one of the most visually stunning films that I have ever had the pleasure of watching. I stumbled upon this movie years and years ago, probably decades ago at this point, while I was working at a bookstore. We had a little DVD department, and every once in a while I used to go there and look for new movies, and The Fall was one that stood out to me. I really love Lee Pace. I watched him in a television series called Pushing Daisies, and so when I saw him on the front cover of this movie, I instantly grabbed it and just took it home to watch. And I am so very glad that I did. It is visually just outstanding. That alone, I think, gives it 2 thumbs up and my wholehearted recommendation of just watch it for how beautiful it is. It was filmed in 10 different countries, I believe, and everything works perfectly with the story that goes along with it. So the story of The Fall follows the character Roy Walker, and Roy Walker is a stuntman for movies. And this takes place back in 1915, I believe. It's definitely around like the 1920s-ish type era, where when you were making films, the stuntmen were legitimately doing the stunts. They were the Tom Cruises of their time. There were no green screens. There was nothing, as advanced as that. So if you had to film, let's say, someone jumping in front of a train, you literally had to film that person jumping in front of a train. So the movie that they are kind of filming inside of this film, Lee Pace is the stunt actor for that. Well, he discovers that the girl he is dating, who is coincidentally the lead actress of this movie, has dumped him for the lead actor or her co-star. And Roy does not take that news very well, as most of us probably would not. While they are filming, he takes his horse and he rides it off of a train bridge into the water below. Essentially, he is attempting to take his own life. And that is the theme that kind of continues throughout the film, is that he is in a very depressive state, I would say. And all of his motivation is just in being able to succeed in leaving this life behind. So at the same time, there is this character, Alexandria, played by Katinka Untaru. And as a little just sort of side bit of information, Katinka was actually the first child actress from Romania to ever be cast in an international film. And she absolutely deserved all of that. She is an incredible little actress in this. She does an amazing job. I think that she brings so much tenderness to it that is definitely needed for a story like this. So Alexandria in the film comes from a foreign family who is obviously of the poorer side of things. And her family, in order to make a living, picks fruit. I'm not sure if they ever show kind of what it is, but it's like she's climbing ladders to get it, like apple trees or orange trees. And she falls off of the ladder and breaks her arm, which is what lands her in the same hospital as Roy. Through the circumstances of them meeting each other, she's asking him to tell her a story. And so he strikes up this bargain with her that if she will help him get morphine, which is a pill that he intends to use to succeed in taking his own life while in the hospital, he will tell her this story. So the tale that he starts to weave her is one about the Red Bandit. And the Red Bandit has been betrayed and has lost his brother, I believe, to an evil villain, right? Just this villain in the story. And so he's on this quest for revenge. And everything that you get to see in the film is Alexandria's imagination or what she visualizes all of these characters from Roy's story to look like. So as Roy is telling the story, when he brings up this red bandit, Alexandria pictures him as the red bandit. So there are a lot of characters in the film where you see them in real life inside this hospital, and then you see that this little girl is envisioning them as a character inside of Roy Walker's story. So for instance, Nurse Evelyn, who the little girl really likes a lot, becomes the princess in the story that Roy is telling. And I think Charles Darwin is in it. There's a mystic. There's a one-legged man. I mean, there are just so many incredible characters. Alexander the Great is in this one as well. Like it's just a wonderful story altogether. So as Roy is telling this story, it also is kind of showing you what's going on inside the hospital and between him and Alexandria. And you get to see what's happening in reality and then what's happening in this fairy tale that he's weaving for her. She does, obviously end up helping him with some of these other things that he's trying to do. So, for instance, when she goes to get him morphine, she reads the bottle and reads, that you need 2 pills. So she leaves 2 pills in the bottle and she dumps the rest of them so that when she brings it back, there's only 2. And it's kind of her just innocent nature and the fact that she really is just clueless to what he's attempting to do, that she kind of just thwarts him unknowingly throughout this whole story. And by the end of it, has a different outlook and he's kind of changed his mind. And there is one scene that is particularly not brutal. I don't think that's an appropriate word, but it tugs at your heartstrings for sure. At one point when he sends her back to get more pills, she's climbing up this cabinet that stores all of the medications in that hospital, and she falls off of this cabinet and hits her head and actually injures herself. And so I think one of the doctors comes to Roy and says, you really have to think about what you're doing. Your actions are now physically hurting other people. And is it really that important to take your own life, and at what expense? And I think the story behind that and the whole just way that it's told is absolutely incredible. It sort of reminds me of the show The Blacklist, where his character is kind of explaining that suicide is a bit like a bomber, where you're taking yourself out, but the blast radius of everybody that gets hit beyond that, you don't realize that taking your own life has a ripple effect. And I think that that's kind of exactly what's happening to Roy Walker in this movie, is that he's so caught up in his own pain and his own, feelings of inadequacy and not wanting to continue, that he doesn't actually care who he hurts in the process of being able to achieve that goal. And throughout the course of this movie, he learns maybe that that's not the choice that he wants to make. And I think it is absolutely beautiful. And the relationship between Roy and Alexandria in the movie is incredible. And the story itself is just visually stunning to watch and moving and lovely. And I would highly recommend it if you haven't watched it, to definitely go out and take a look. I don't think that it did incredibly well in the market. I think it made $4 million at the box office, but it has fairly good reviews. I think that anyone who sees it would really have a hard time not enjoying it. It has a great underlying message, I think, but that isn't shoved down your throat in some kind of way. It's just a very beautiful tale on both ends. What happens in the story that he's telling kind of is a reflection of how he's feeling at the time. And you don't get to see that type of thing happening in films too often, I think, where, it comes from a much deeper place than just movies for entertainment. And I think The Fall is definitely one of those that just will touch you in some kind of way if you let it. And it's wonderful. It's one of the most stunning, as I've mentioned like 10 times in this review so far, it's one of the most stunning works of film that I have ever seen. It's just so beautiful. Like, they could print out prints of just certain scenes in this film and I would hang them in my house. Like, they're just glorious to behold. The way that they filmed it is amazing to me. So definitely check it out. Let me know what you guys think of The Fall if you've seen it. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family. You can follow me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.
Next.